So this is part 3 of the definitive guide to breaking the conspiracy theories on ways that the left is trying to convince you that they're going to be able to prevent Donald Trump from taking office. Part 3, the Electoral Count Act. On January 6th, Congress is going to convene to receive the electoral slates from each individual state. The first part of this conspiracy theory that I keep seeing are people saying that Kamala Harris should just refuse to accept and certify the votes. The problem with that is she has absolutely no authority to determine what votes should be counted and which ones shouldn't. And the Democrats saw to that in 2022 in an effort to appear like they were doing something to remedy what they saw as a threat to democracy in the 2020 election. Democrats passed the Electoral Count Reform Act of 2022. And in that act, they clarified a couple of really important things. The first one is they made the president of the Senate, or the presiding officer over January 6th, who's the vice president, they made her role nothing but ministerial. It's ceremonial. And they felt that this was important because the prior Electoral Count Act from the 1800s was a little less clear. And there were some people that believed that the vice president did have the authority to make a decision on which slates of electors they were going to accept. Well, now they don't have that option. And the other thing that it did is it raised the bar for what passes for a successful objection. It used to be that one member of the House and one member of the Senate in writing could formally object to the votes cast by a state, and now they raised it to 20% of both houses. So now it's clear. The bar for them to be able to formally object to any of the electors cast is much higher. And more importantly, Kamala Harris can't just decide not to certify. So what happens if they do object? And it's possible that Democrats can object. And I'm hearing that many of them are planning to object based on the 14th Amendment, which is interesting because that's another novel legal theory that Democrats love to just create out of thin air, particularly considering the fact that in Definitive Guide Part 1, we showed you that that point is already moot because they never legislated specifically related to this election. And the legislation that is in effect today is back from the 1870s, which required a district attorney in a federal court to file a civil action, which never happened. But nonetheless, they can try. So if Democrats come together, they file an objection, they meet the 20% threshold. What happens next is both houses adjourn. They go back and they debate on whether each particular objection is to be successful. And they do that through a majority vote in both houses. The problem? Democrats don't have a majority in the House or the Senate. And let's assume that somehow they are able to convince Republicans to go along with them. The only thing that happens to a successful objection is those electoral votes are removed, meaning they don't get handed over to Kamala Harris, they just get taken away from Donald Trump's tally. That means Kamala Harris is never going to reach the 270 threshold in order to be able to win, should they be successful to take enough electoral counts away from Donald Trump. So what happens then is they go to the 12th Amendment, which outlines a process by which a contentious election is settled. And that's simple. The House picks the president, the Senate picks the vice president. The way the House votes is each state delegation, as determined by control of the state legislature, gets one vote, not one vote per representative, one vote per state. Problem? Republicans control 28 states, and the Senate votes one vote per senator. Republicans have majority control over the Senate. All this to say, they can object, but it won't work because they don't control the House, they don't control the Senate. Kamala Harris can't make a decision on whether to certify or not. Democrats made sure of that in 2022. And if they were successful to remove enough delegates from Donald Trump, Republicans control 28 state houses, who's ultimately going to decide who the next president is. So again, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do that's going to stop Donald Trump from taking office. Nothing.